Camberhouse.
Give me my respect.
Welcome to Camberhouse.
You're now rocking with the best.
Join your hosts, Jeremy and James, as they take an unfiltered and uncensored look at the car industry and motorsport across the globe.
You can't find the right tool in this garage, you don't belong near a car.
Welcome to the home of car culture.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Camberhouse. Today we've got a very exciting guest. This man has been involved in motorsport for most of his life, and not to age him, but that is a decent amount of time. He currently sits as the president of the Barbados Motoring Federation, which is the federation that's in charge for all motorsport and clubs in Barbados. He has also not too long ago picked back up rallying as a little hobby here in Barbados, and above all of that, he is a FIA Formula One steward. So welcome, Andrew Mallu, to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Jay, and thanks, James. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you too.
I'm sorry to say that Jeremy did co-drive for me once.
I do. We'll get
How
to
was that?
We're going to get to that.
Just saying, when he said I used to rally, or I rallied, I just remember I had one very inept co-driver at one time. But Jeremy was good.
I'm glad we started off that way. Yeah. What we do here on the show, Andrew, the first thing we normally do here is ask you what your earliest memory of motorsport was. Can you remember back to the first thing that triggers your mind about motorsport, whether it was local or international, something you saw? Is there anything that stands out?
Yeah, there actually is, and I do quote it a fair amount. And I obviously I was going to motorsport from very young with my dad involved, but I have a vivid recollection of Brands Hatch in 1972 at 8 years old, which was when my dad was the first international kind of event I went to. I think it was his first Formula One race as well. But sometimes, memories from that long ago, sometimes you're not sure if it is the actual memory you have, or is it the pictures that you saw, is it the stories that you told. But I actually have a very good memory of that day at Brands Hatch.
Okay. Did you have a favorite driver growing up? I mean, I know that was 8, but after that, did you watch Formula One? Did you have a favorite driver?
So I went to that race in 72, and then the next race I went to was in Brazil in 90 or 91. And then I started back following Formula One. Then I don't know that I followed it in between, but I think Emerson Fittipaldi, if I go back to the early years, and I think that's because I really liked his car. I think the car was pretty. That John Player's special car was the Lotus.
Yes, Lotus, the black and the gold. Yeah.
I loved that car. So that was that. And then, I was never a Senna fan. I was a Schumacher fan. I am a Schumacher fan.
Of course. Actually, interesting, this past weekend I saw his son giving Lewis the helmet.
Yeah, that was special.
Which is pretty special.
For sure.
It looks like Mick is going to get his drive shortly, maybe.
We'll see.
We'll see what happens.
I remember, obviously, when I was young, because we've known each other for a long time, obviously.
Yes, godson.
Yes, you are my godfather. But I remember when I was young, in those, what I referred to on a couple podcasts ago with Neil Bernard as the glory days of Bushy Park, being up in the clubhouse. At the time, you had what would have been like one of the most ridiculous GTI Swifts, huge slicks, black Havilene livery. Do you remember what it was like racing in those days? And was that kind of your... Were you racing prior to this car that I have a memory of in that Swift, or was that like your first kind of...
Yeah, we go back a little further than that, Jay. So, first racing, though, was when Bushy Park restarted in those years. And that would be a story all of itself, but that was basically Richard Ruitt and Sean Gill and Roger Skeet, Roger Hill. We used to go up to Bushy Park on a Saturday afternoon. William Branch was there. And we had to clear all the bush, and slowly, and after about 4, 5, 6 months of going up there on Saturdays afternoons and kind of doing laps and so on, it was when then Ward Simpson and Brian DeFreitas then decided to actually reopen Bushy Park. So that would have been then what you saw with us racing at Bushy Park. But before that, my memory of racing at Bushy Park would have been in the control tower with my dad then in the early 70s. And the vivid memory, going back to what you were asking, other memory that I definitely have is the day that Mike Atwell on the start line basically touched wheels between his terrapin and one of the Brabhams or something, and he ended up on his head. If you don't know the story of that, that was quite something. He nearly died. I mean, in the end of the day, he had big surgery to relieve clots on his brain and stuff like that. So I remember that vividly as a little boy in the tower.
Well, that's something that would obviously stick in your mind. It's funny how those kind of accidents, a lot of memories are based off of those kind of.
Sure.
But long before the GTI, there was my sister's automatic Starlet. That was we rallied that. Sean Gill and I. That was our first rally car.
And this is obviously well before the days of roll cages and all those types of safety things.
Yeah, well, when we were rallying, there definitely was no roll cages, but eventually that car got a roll cage and it got a gearbox instead of being automatic as well, which was nice. And I can't remember if we won any June rallies in that, but Sean and I went on, I think, to win five June rallies then. The Swift came in '92, so I'd had at least 10 years of rallying before I started Swift.
Okay.
And was it always rallying for you, or did you start in track? I mean, what Bushy Park was basically.
It was track.
Both, right?
I guess so. Yeah.
Right. So did you always want to get into rallying, or I mean?
Well, I don't know that the disciplines through the years in Barbados have been really different. I mean, what has happened is that at one time rallying was really big, and everybody had rally cars and nobody had race cars. And then the same guys, migrated their cars to race cars. In fact, the first year we all went down to Guyana to race, they all laughed at us and said, why are you bringing rally cars to race with us down here? They laughed at Roger Skeet's 1.9 Peugeot rally car, standing up in the air, big suspension and stuff. And we won, we beat all these guys down there. But those cars then slowly morphed and we stopped rallying. And we were all racing, and then racing was big because it's very difficult to do both, for many people to do both. That's the challenge. Yeah. So you either have a car that's good for rallying or you have a car that's good for the track.
Yeah.
Yeah. What you used to do, did you ever drive the Swift in rallies?
Yeah, so what happened is after Bushy Park died down when it was closed. And before then, because the Rally Club reopened it, and then it closed, and then Barrel reopened it. But during those years when it wasn't closed, many of us then had to convert our race cars back to rally cars, and that was horrendous because trying to drive what was then, I don't know, 1500cc Swift on 10-inch slicks in rallies. We used to go through 3 gearboxes every rally. You used to have them there, you're ready for them to break, and that's how it was.
That's how it was, yeah.
Wow. But then all those cars are gone now, and everybody has purpose-built rally cars, and a lot of guys who are rallying don't have race cars.
True, very true. And what was the last? Because there was like a period where you weren't racing or rallying. So what was the last competition car you drove before that break? I
was a Swift. I sold the Swift in '97 when I left Simpson Motors. I sold the Swift to a guy in England, and he raced it at Silverstone. Lost track of it now; it probably doesn't exist. But from '97 to 2007, I just focused on, from motorsport point of view, I was focused on the administration, and we did a lot of good things in those years.
Yeah.
And then I passed the used car lot one day and saw the Subaru that you so helped me with. But anyhow, and I bought the Subaru. Yeah.
So, sorry, I have a question.
Well, you had the Subaru right up until the latest R5 that you've gone into, or did you have reiterations of the Subaru over many years?
Well, you didn't mean to ask this, but I'll give you a different answer.
Go on.
So the first rally I ever went into, and the first rally car I had, was a 4-wheel drive Subaru in 1981.
Right.
Okay, which was a 1980 1600 DL 4-wheel drive Subaru that you could engage the 4-wheel drive with a lever. And I thought that was hot, man. I had this thing. And
How did you do?
Well, the first year I didn't have a driver's license, so my sister's boyfriend had to go into the rally. He was the driver, and I was the co-driver. Or I wasn't co-driver, I was the navigator, as we call it. And how did we do? We were lost most of the time, but we didn't stick up. We didn't stick up because we had 4-wheel drive.
Right, that was good.
So then, what was your question?
He was asking you about the if the Subaru was your first kind of rally car.
Yeah, it was, to be quite honest, it was the first decent rally car and a car with some decent performance. That Group N Subaru had some grunt. I mean, it was an 04 car, but it still had some grunt to it, and you could get yourself in a lot of trouble. Oh, yeah.
It was fun.
Oh, yeah.
I was very grateful for the couple rallies I did with you. I mean, obviously, I've bounced around into a few navigator seats before. You were the first four-wheel drive car I ever went in, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I appreciate you still tell everyone that I'm faster than Josh Reed. I really apprioate that. So thanks.
We'll have to get Josh on next,
Yeah,
right?
I'm not sure we'll go that far, but you certainly tried your best.
I heard it. You heard it, right? Everyone's heard it. Yeah.
No, the Group N was a lot of fun. You've never invited me to come for a ride in the R5, so I'm a bit upset about that.
Well, we're gonna do the R5 thing right now.
Okay.
How did the process of you going into R5? Tell me about. Was it a choice that everybody seemed to be doing it? Was it a discussion you had? Because we've spoken to Rob Swan about him and Panton's relationship and how they were always going to go WRC. It seemed like they just wanted to be everybody. But whereas there's this growing, R5 class, which we think is going to be close and exciting.
Yeah, I think it's the most exciting group.
Yeah. Walk me through the process of you deciding.
For me, there was two things to it. I sat on the FIA Rallies Commission for a number of years, and I could see the rules coming down. And at that time, I would have had what was, in their words, an N4, and then that was being converted into an R4. But the R5 was, excuse me.
That's okay.
The R5 was clear in the regulations, and for a few years, I pushed at the club level at the rules to say, why don't we adopt R5 as being where we want to go, because obviously the 2-litre WRC cars were coming to the end of their life.
Yep.
There's still one in Barbados, but it's tough. It's tough because it's a nice car, but it's older. It's an old car. And eventually, when that was adopted as a regulation, and David Coelho made the first adventure into one here. Yeah. I was keen to follow that, but it was a matter of, frankly, finding the right one at the right price. And at my age, I was not willing to try left-hand drive again. It didn't work for me the first time.
Right.
So once it was clear within the club regulations that they didn't have a problem with left-hand or right-hand drive, you could do that. There was no performance gain. If anything, it's a little bit of a backward step because the geometry of the right-hand drive is a little bit different. I was eager to go in there, and I'm not eager to go into WRC because, frankly, if you're going to go into WRC, you have to be the guy who is willing to put everything on the line every time. Yeah. And shit happens sometimes with that, as we have seen, and knock wood, thankfully,
everybody's okay.
No issues.
Yeah.
You went to the UK to get this one. This is or where'd you find the car?
I found it off the internet. There are a number of resellers
Facebook
of rally
Marketplace.
cars. Yeah, and it wasn't quite Facebook Marketplace. This and that. No,
Imagine if you could just buy R5s off Marketplace.
But there are 3 or 4 good resellers of rally cars. This one came from KG Motorsports, Kieran Graffing or something, I think his name is. Out of Ireland, and that's because I went looking for a right-hand drive. In Ireland, they have a lot of right-hand drive R5s. They convert them. So that's where I got that from.
Did you drive it before you bought it?
No.
You got it here somehow, and then the first time you drove it was when it got here?
First time I ever drove an R5 was when it got here.
Right.
Wow.
And I was terribly disappointed because I drove it from the port where it came in, and I drove it home, but I didn't realize you had to press the R5 button, which was the go fast button, for it to do anything. So I drove home a 1600cc, normally aspirated. It seemed like dead as hell car, and I was really upset. I thought, I have made a huge mistake.
How am I supposed to go rallying in this? It felt like a step back from the Group N.
It was terrible. It was awful. But the thing, it has one button, and you press this button, and it goes from it goes to completely berserk when you just press that one button. I'm assuming Brett Judd probably guided you and said you forgot to press this. When you did eventually press it, what was that like? How was the first experience like properly driving the R5? Well, it was nice to only press one button because you see the Subaru, you had to turn on this and turn on that and turn on the water spray and set the different. The R5, there's one button and there's nothing else. But honestly, it transforms the car. The car sounds different. Everything about it. The dashboard changes to a whole different thing to look at. And the car is extremely quick. I mean, it doesn't have the grunt of a 2-liter. A 1600 and a 2-liter just can't compete with the torque.
Not the same.
Right? They're not. So it's it's a 32 millimeter restrictor is what it is. They're all the cars are the same, other than Ken Block's. His is a new one, but they're all the same. But they're quick. But they're not quick in terms of, if you make a mistake and you want to make back up that 100 yards where you're off the RPM or something, you don't have that grunt there.
Yeah.
You've got to keep it singing and keep the momentum going with it.
Okay. What's the grip? What's the grip like? I mean,
Absolutely phenomenal.
Like,
I mean, I was talking to someone about it last night. As an example, my Subaru, when I would go around Bushy Park on that Rally Race of Champions track, if you clip a curb, this thing is up on 2 wheels. In the R5, you can drive over every curb at Bushy Park, and like if it wasn't there, you would not even feel it.
Yeah.
Right?
Everything's
And the
just
other thing I
dialed
can
in.
tell is if I do 4 or 5 laps with the Subaru around Bushy Park, if I'm going clockwise, the 2 left side tires are done, finished. I can drive that R5 for an hour at Bushy Park on the same compound of tire. The car is very similar in weight, and the tires wear evenly. It tells you tires are working.
Yeah.
And the balance is obviously phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's far newer. It's almost unfair to compare them, but the R5s are really, really impressive. I'm very excited.
The R5 is a proper. Sorry, you can interrupt me, Jeremy.
No, it's
The
cool.
real difference is the R5 is a developed rally car.
Yeah.
It's not a road car that someone like the Group N concept was start with a production car and change a few bits and you have Group N. That's not R5. R5 set out everything on it is built for that.
Yeah.
And then things work. The other thing to remember is that people think, oh, you spend a lot of money for the R5. Well, they're not that expensive in terms of rally cars.
Yes.
And then things don't break.
Yeah.
They work.
And the running cost is supposed to be pretty good compared to
Very
everything.
good. In the year I've had it, I would say the running costs have been 1/4 of what it was with the Subaru. One quarter.
Yeah. Wow.
Usage of tires,
Axles
usage of
that you
fuel,
break all the time.
and just the stuff you need to maintain.
Yeah.
And availability. Everything is price controlled on the R5 as well.
That's what I think is fantastic as well. No, it's hard to argue against them. That's the truth. Just a quick one, because you mentioned Ken Block is coming with the newer version. What's the difference?
I don't know. It's faster. It's a Mark II.
Is that an excuse already? Is that an excuse already?
No, it's no excuse. I'm going to beat him.
So this is the what they call him the Fiat, the 2.
So but
It's a Mark II.
Right.
Well, yeah,
we're
but
trying to figure this out.
Well, that's how
Well, what it
WRC
was.
is referring to the classification. It's still an R5 car, but his is just
It's
some
called
upgrade.
WRC2, right?
So
Yeah.
that's a different issue. So the FIA naming of the rallies has changed now for the 3rd time in a while.
It's very
All of us have gotten
confusing.
accustomed to the R's.
Right.
R5, 4, 3, 2. Everyone. So they've abandoned that.
Yeah.
So now
Which
you
is
have
nice.
WRC, which is for the professionals with the big cars and stuff. You have WRC2, which are R5 cars
Exactly, that was
with
my
professional
point,
teams.
Yeah.
And WRC3 is R5 cars with independents, not factory teams.
So because his
So
is a
his is a
factory and sport
factory-
car, WRC2.
Yes,
it's an
and he's a
R5.
priority driver. Yes.
Right. Okay. But the car would have differences to yours.
Fundamentally, it's a completely different car. So this is a Mark II. If you remember Mark I Escort, Mark II Escort,
Yes.
Mark I Fiesta, Mark II. So all of us who have the 5 R5s that are here now, the 2 Skodas and the 3 Fords, they all are on the Evolution 2 of the engine. So it's the Mark I car on the second version of the engine.
Okay.
Right.
What Ken Block has is the Mark II car on another evolution of the engine.
One that's not been seen yet.
Yeah, certainly not in Barbados. So we would expect that it's a lot more drivable. It's got a bit more horsepower. It's a better car, no doubt about that.
Well, at least you guys got home court advantage.
We have home court advantage, and Ken's record is 100%. He should put sponsorship on the bottom of the car, shouldn't he? But no, I did that just for him because I know he's going to be watching it. But he's going to have a lot of fun.
Tuning into this, I'm sure. Yeah, he's a keen listener of Camberhouse.
I'm gonna finish with Rally, I think, at the end and goals for this year and stuff. But I think we want to get into a little bit about the BMF and how you became involved in the BMF to start with.
Yeah, the BMF story I think is a great one. The history of Barbados, you can't deny a small country like this where we originally had, when I got involved in motorsport, there were really 2 clubs. There was the Motoring Club and there was the Barbados Rally Club. Barbados Rally Club is predominantly white people, and the Motoring Club of Barbados was predominantly black people. And that's the history of Barbados. There's no sense denying it. That's how it was. But by the time it came to my generation, those color lines were not something that we saw. And what we saw through the late or mid 80s into the 90s was that the clubs really operated together. But historically, the Barbados Rally Club was the holder of the National Sporting Authority that was recognized as the main club, and the FIA also recognized it. So in order to put all clubs on equal grounds and leave the past behind the past, all clubs agreed to form the Motoring Federation, which would be over all the clubs, so all the clubs would be equal. So that happened in 2000 with 5 founding member clubs, the Rally Club being one, Motoring Club, Vaucluse, Automobile Association, and the Barbados, I left one out, the Karting Association, I think were the 5 originals. And that was in 2000, and I was elected as president then. Prior to that, I had been the FIA delegate for the BRC when they were members of the FIA. Since then, what the BMF has been able to do, and we've had some great committees. I'm the president, I'm the figurehead, really. I have no vote. I just kind of herd the sheep or herd the cats, if you want to call it that. We have an insurance program, we have road closures, we have the duty-free import scheme. We've had all the various benefits from the grants. Bushy Park restarted. So we really have blossomed by all of the clubs coming together under one federation. And of course, we have new clubs as well. We've got clubs like BAD who have been formed since then, and great things happening with that. And
Phenomenal.
So how does that, so even prior to coming into or being elected president of the BMF, you said you were an FIA delegate. So that position or whatever maintained as you transitioned into this BMF presidency, and or how do you become an FIA delegate?
Right. So the Barbados Rally Club was a member of the FIA.
Right.
And they were entitled to nominate someone from their group to represent the Barbados Rally Club at the FIA meetings. I had shown an interest in doing that, and it took a time and a money commitment and so on to do it. I think Simon Gilmore may have done it for a couple of years, is the only other person who did it. And then I was on the Rally Club committee as treasurer, and I said I would do it, and I did it for a few years. But when we transitioned then to the Motoring Federation, a federation was viewed differently as a club. So the president of the federation represents the federation at the FIA. And the easiest way to think of the FIA is think of it as United Nations. It's a one country, one vote, which is quite scary because when Barbados votes, we actually have more votes than the United States of America because they don't have an automobile club. Their automobile club, the American Automobile Association, is not part of the FIA. So they don't get to vote on the mobility side. So we have twice as many votes as them.
So why is that?
Crazy.
Why are they not involved? Is it just
because America?
I know they want to do things themselves and they have their
No,
own
but
things.
there is some legitimate things to it. I mean, it's pretty scary when you think. I think Germany, their automobile club, I think they have 45 million members.
Jeez.
Okay. The automobile clubs tend to be businesses like the Canadian Automobile Association, AAA, AA, and they're big businesses. They're in roadside assistance, they're in insurance, and they get into other things. They own property. So these are large businesses. The federation, the FIA, does not have a commercial motive. So it's difficult for commercial entities to bow down to a superior power who has no commercial motives.
Right. That makes sense.
Makes total sense.
Yeah, I can understand that. That's interesting, though. I mean, I don't know if anybody really knows. I mean, people that are in motorsport are familiar with it, definitely know what FIA is, but
for sure.
It's just
a governing body.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I guess leads us to kind of, I guess, the most exciting part for me and that we wanted to talk about was the journey to becoming an F1 steward and how this came about, how the opportunity came about. Can you walk me through how this happened?
Yeah. I've thought about it many times to think of how to connect the dots. I'm not sure if I remember exactly how to connect the dots. But I've always had an interest in rules and how rules are written, and I think at some point in going to these FIA meetings, I probably expressed an opinion here or there. I did express an opinion in participating in the Rallies Commission, and I was elected to the Rallies Commission to represent this region, because each region had a representative. So I started on the Rallies Commission, and I would help with drafting of regulations and so on. And I guess at some point somebody noticed something. Mm-hmm. And when the presidency changed from Max Mosley to Jean Todt, there were opportunities were given for people to do training for single seater, because up to that point I had been doing rallying. I'd been rallying stewarding. And I think it was either 2009 or 2010 I entered the single seater training, which was very informal back then. They didn't actually have a training. The way it was is that they told you, you go to these 2 races and sit in the steward's room and learn what you can. And my first race like that was Montreal in 2010, I think it was. I didn't even know how to get to the track. They didn't provide a whole lot. I didn't even know where the room was. I didn't know a thing. And I went in there, and who was in the room to drive a steward that weekend but Emerson Fittipaldi.
No way.
Wow, full circle. Back to when you were 8 years old. That's quite a story, actually.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I have pictures of him. You may remember, Jay, when I had that back surgery, and I had on this big thing because I'd had spine surgery, and felt so embarrassed and thinking I was wearing this and sitting in the back of the room, and that was I think that was if I'm not mistaken, that was the race that Lewis Hamilton, driving for McLaren, parked his car just after turn 1, 2, 3 complex there in qualifying, because he didn't have enough fuel to get back to the pit, and the regulation was that you had to have enough fuel for them to take a sample, and big controversy. So I sat there the first time and heard all of this going on. I was like, commotion, what? Does this really go on? And I'll give you one funny story which I've told people, is that eventually the stewards of that day decided to fine McLaren 10,000 euros. And I was thinking, my God, 10,000 euros, that is a lot of money. How is this going to go over? And just as I was absorbing that, Christian Horner came and said, look, I spend more than 10,000 euros on flowers on the weekend. So
sounds like something that he would say.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, that sounds about right.
And I've heard him talk about it as well, so I'm not breaching any confidence. But, the point was a lesson to be learned there, that, the rule, if that's what it took to get to pole position was to run on fumes, they're willing to do it.
And take the fine.
Take the fine.
Yeah. That's interesting.
That
so
is very
2010 so you went through 2 years of training?
Yeah, I think it was 2 years of training.
2010 to 12.
Yeah.
And how many other, you said Jean Todt, when it changed over, this was like an initiative from him, right? To get younger people into stewarding.
Yep.
Was there a lot of trainees like you, or was it just you?
I remember there were 2.
Okay.
A guy called Tim Mayer, myself. Tim Mayer, for those rail motorheads that are listening to this, his father was Teddy Mayer. Teddy Mayer and Bruce McLaren started McLaren. Those were the 2 that did McLaren.
Gotcha.
So Teddy died many years ago. Tim is his son, American guy. And he had promoted Indy cars throughout South America and so on. And so Tim and I did training together. Tim is now chairman of the F1 stewards. There are four chairmen, and Tim is one of them. Very proud. He's done a great job. And Tim was here in Barbados a number of times. He was the race director for Global Rallycross.
Really?
So, yeah.
Oh,
so
wow,
Tim
interesting.
has been here a few times.
Okay.
And he still is one of the top stewards, chairman of the stewards at World Rallycross. He basically is a professional steward.
Wow.
He does.
That's
Amazing.
So your question was, as far as I know, there was only 2 of us. Now there's a very formal program the last 4 years.
okay.
In fact, Warren Gollop did it this year. He went and attended the first of the stewards training, and there's kind of a ladder now that if you do well on the test after the 4-day learning, you take a test, and then if you do well, they appoint you at some lower series, maybe F4 or F3, and then they evaluate you over a period of years before you get eventually, hopefully. But at the end of the day, there are only 12 FIA F1 stewards.
Of which you are one.
Luckily, yes. Luckily.
It's quite amazing.
Wow. Yeah, we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Alrighty, so back for part 2. I think we're just getting into, well, we've gone through the process of what it was like as an F1 or to get to become an F1 steward. What's a race weekend look like for you when you go to a race? How does you leave Barbados? What happens?
Yeah. Well, let's start from the racetrack because the rest is just travel, depending on where it is.
Yeah.
Normally arrive on the Wednesday. First official meeting is always the track walk on Thursday mornings, always at 9 o'clock. Charlie's schedule was always, that's it.
Charlie Whiting, right?
Yeah. So Michael.
And what's the purpose there? So you guys get a clear vision of track limits. You understand kind of just, is that it? I mean,
And who are you walking with at this point, or is it just stewards?
So there's quite a group that walks. So on any one race weekend, F1 usually has support races. So the track walk is for everyone. So it could be the stewards of F1, F2, F3. It could be sometimes the Porsche Cup cars are there, or if there's something else. So you'll have the race directors, the deputy race directors for each of the series, the stewards, the clerk of the course, chief marshal. And it's multifaceted what you're doing. From a steward's point of view, what we're looking at is trying to get some orientation to the track of what the drivers might see in different areas, positions of lights, position of track marshals. But you also get then to be involved in some of the things that the race director is looking at, which is primarily a safety matter. And is the track ready for it to go live? And every time a track evolves, so they may have a new place that they're putting the camera, so they'll take a look at that. Is it in a safe place and so on, or they've put a camera into a curb, or they've decided to put some bollards in to tell you if you go off in this curb, you have to do that, or we put a new cheat loop in somewhere. So all of those things we get to talk and discuss. For me, what's useful about it, I do think, is getting a clear orientation to the track for that weekend, and the television cameras don't do a good job with the undulations and blind spots and so on.
Yeah.
That's the Thursday, 9 o'clock is track meeting. It's track walk. Then we end up signing a bunch of documents and entries and a lot of mundane administrative stuff. The next big thing that we normally are involved in is the team managers meeting, which is on a Thursday afternoon. At that meeting, the team managers speak about the last race and speak to the race director, any issues, any things that they have noticed out on the track that may need addressing before the cars go live the next day. So again, some more admin stuff comes out of that, and the cars are then out of park for me, and so issues could come up at that point. Friday, then you have 2 sessions with F1 on the track, and at the end of that day, you have the drivers' briefing. And so then the drivers get an opportunity to talk about what happened in the last race meeting and issues that come up from that, and things that have hung over.
This is the drivers speaking to you and all these stewards.
Yeah. So the meetings are chaired by the race director, Michael, and the stewards are present for that.
I see. Okay.
So it used to be in the pre-COVID world that was all of us in one big room, and the drivers all come with their managers. And everyone has to be there. If it's 3:04, they have to be there. They're there at 3:04, and it's very precise. In fact, every race weekend, we're given a book. It's called the Minute by Minute, and basically every minute of a F1 race weekend is planned. It's exactly what is happening.
That's crazy.
It's not
a machine.
It's an absolute machine. And then of course, the support races sometimes feel the pressure of that, because if they have crap going on, the F1 schedule doesn't change. So
you're on time
interesting.
limit.
Yeah. So the driver's briefing is then the Friday. So they've had a chance to drive the track, and they get to comment about, well, we think this or we think that or whatever. And that's the last time we see the drivers and so on. And then, of course,
Hopefully.
Right? Yeah. Last time in that capacity. We always see them after that. But yes. Saturday, of course, is then you got FP3 and you have qualifying, and And usually we don't have to speak to anyone in FP1, 2, or 3. Those types of incidents are usually impeding or something.
But for those sessions, you will still be in the steward's box.
Yeah, the only place. Whenever the cars are live on the track, the stewards are in the stewards room. There's nowhere else for us to be.
Right. Okay. Interesting. What's it like?
It's not as glamorous as people think, and not as glamorous as I think.
You were on TV.
I heard so.
Yeah, you're famous now, man. Congrats.
Yeah,
I've got a picture somewhere.
Yeah, I didn't look overly fancy, and I didn't necessarily think it was fancy. It's just you guys have a ton of equipment, TV screens, computers reading out whatever they're reading out.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you have the ability to in there to you can jump on whatever
But you must be
camera
able to
you
tell
want to jump on.
somebody to move cameras to see, right?
All that's true.
Okay.
Yeah. So we basically have, I think, 4. We have 4 big flat screen TVs in front of us. One, we're watching the live feed, and then the other ones can be more or less anything that we want. But generally speaking, we have a video operator. There's a great company called Riedel, a German company, who do most of the video and comms and stuff for F1. And we have a Riedel operator, and he has the ability to replay anything from any angle, from anywhere. So whatever we want to see. And in F1 these days, you have, some cars have 4 cameras on it. Every corner, every track we go to has the local cameras, which tend to be very iffy resolution. But then, of course, if you get something that's caught on the feed, on the F1 feed, that's very high definition and great to look at. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is the operator has some fancy equipment that would blow your mind, and he can replay for us instantly anything. And then he can show us all the telemetry from every car as well. So we can say, this guy was on the brakes, he was on the throttle, the guy behind him was closing at X speed, he was on an out lap, he was on an in lap, he was on a warm-up lap. So you supposedly have enough information to make a good decision.
But and I guess to add to that, or to aid at least from a driver's perspective, there's always a driver. Do they call him a driver's steward? I forgot what the actual proper name is. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
So this is somebody who has competed in the sport at a high level, maybe not necessarily an F1 driver, or is it always somebody who's racing F1?
No, it's to be quite honest. Now I know a few of them. You have Mallalieu, Italian, and he's won Le Mans, I think, 4 or 5 times. Tom Christensen, who is Le Mans as well. Mm-hmm. I think I joke between Tom and myself, we've won 9 Le Mans 24 hours. He's won 9 and I have won none. But you have Derek Warwick, Mika Salo, obviously is F1. The role of the driver steward is to bring a driver's perspective onto an incident. They're not experts in the rules, regulations in the ISC, although many of them, if not all of them, have dedicated themselves over the years to understanding the rules. But really, where they're extremely useful to us as stewards is understanding the positional awareness of a driver in a particular incident. That has become very, very useful to us, because none of us, you don't care whatever you drive. We were talking in the little break there about driving, Ferraris or something. Mm-hmm. Just remember that a Formula One car, when you lift off of the throttle, the act of lifting off of the throttle is better braking than the most exotic F1 car you can imagine. A road car, right? So you get your best Lamborghini, your best Ferrari, your GT3 Porsche, and you stamp on the brakes with the stickiest tires, and you haven't approached the braking power of just lifting.
Just the drag of an F1 car.
Well, and the energy regeneration through the electric side
battery,
of it. Yeah. That is just phenomenal.
Wow.
Interesting. Yeah, I could imagine how important it is to at least try and get some sort of perspective, because as you say, unless you've been in it, there's absolutely nothing that will come remotely close to having you understand what it's like to sit in that car, feel all those things. Fairly limited vision, and the cars are quite big. So no, it's just interesting.
And shit happens quick as well.
Yeah, very quick.
Very quick.
All you hear over the intercom is, I hope the race stewards look at that.
Yeah.
I hope the race stewards look at that one. Constant, right?
I mean, things are happening usually well north of 200 kilometers an hour. And
Mugello was the rough one, right? Which was the everybody went into the back of each other. Was that Mugello?
Yeah. That was a.
You were there for that one.
I was F2, F3, but so I actually watched that live. Yeah,
Wow.
I was there for that. But you know, if you that incident, which has been well ventilated, and I was Mugello. The race immediately following Mugello was Russia.
Yes.
And as I told you earlier, the drivers then would discuss the previous race.
Yes.
So I participated in that discussion of the driver's perspective
Right.
on Mugello.
Because initially I thought that obviously Valtteri was going incredibly slow, but apparently he was within his right to do that. So nobody could fault him for it. Is that how the rule book saw that incident?
100%.
Yeah.
You know, I can't remember how many cars were left in the race at that time, but let's say there were 20. To be quite honest, you know, Valtteri and Lewis were probably the only two that one could say without fault. Everyone else contributed to that from there, but not intentionally. And it was a unique situation. It was a track that they'd never driven at before. You had a safety car line in a different location than the start line. It was a bit of a strange situation. As well as Mugello was a very interesting track because turn one fundamentally had a line through it where you could pass someone on the outside, because by passing on the outside in turn one, you were then on the inside for turn two, which immediately followed it. So what Valtteri was doing, which if those drivers had watched F2 and F3 from the previous races, they would have known that that's exactly what the leader was going to do, was to make sure that no one could get a slipstream on them into turn one. So the way to do that was not to start from turn 15 or 18, I think it is at Mugello, and 15. It was not to go from there, because even without DRS, if you're the second guy in the line, you're going to get past.
Yep.
Interesting.
So he did what was 100% correct, and the guys behind, it was lots of things could have gone differently, and no one was predominantly at fault. Everyone contributed in some way to it.
It was a shit show, though.
It
was a complete shit show.
Very lucky that
And
no
really
one was hurt.
dangerous. Yeah, for sure lucky. I mean, when you look at the Carlos Sainz on board from that crash, thank God for halos, because he nearly got his head taken out.
Yeah.
Crazy. And then, we talked about Mugello, but if we just bounce back quickly to Monza, the stewards were quite busy that race as well.
Again, F2, F3 for me. So, but but again, very straightforward. At the end of the day, you know, lots of fans will have had an opinion when I guess you're speaking to the Lewis into the closed pits. Yeah. But you know, stewards were 1,000% correct, and Lewis took one look at it and recognized that was what it is. And I'm pretty certain.
Is that the one where he ran running upstairs into the steward's box?
Yeah.
Right.
I just found it crazy because, and fair enough, I mean, I suppose the team told him to box, so that's one side of it. But the position of the light on the track, I can't imagine that they can see that in those cars.
There's two.
Yeah, but the second one is when he's in the pit lane. It's too late.
No, I think there's two on the outside.
Maybe you're not allowed to weigh in on this, so.
Maybe not.
You can have an opinion on it. At the end of the day, I'll say to you that after that incident, I suspect that every team has a person in their control room responsible for saying whether the pit lane is open or not.
Yes.
So.
Fair enough. Okay. Fair enough. We can leave it at that.
And actually, so then the last race for you, Sochi, which was again another Lewis doing something. What was it? He was starting from the wrong place.
Yeah, he did a test start.
Test starting, right.
Out of position. No, and you were starting that one?
Yes.
Right, okay. We're not asking you about all the problems and things that went wrong. Just curious.
Actually, because we're going to go into some good stuff. So, favorite track you've been to? Why not? Start with that. Favorite
track for the track? Got to be Spa.
Yes. Why?
Eau Rouge, obviously.
Eau Rouge. And I managed to convince Bird Mainland to give me 2 hot laps in the
AMG.
Yeah, in the safety car, because normally we do as stewards we get to do a few laps reconnaissance sometime during the weekend.
You get to drive or be driven.
Depends. If you're chairman usually drives, or if you have the driver steward there, they normally. It's kind of hard to take the steering wheel from Tom Christensen, and say, I'll drive you. No, I think let him drive. But I managed to do a couple of laps with Byrne once at at Spa. But the most amazing thing is, Eau Rouge, fair enough, he has to lift, and I think he goes down a gear down in the bottom of Eau Rouge and then up to Blanchimont. But there's some other corners there where, when he tells you that the F1 cars are flat through it,
does not make sense.
I just cannot imagine the G-forces that they're feeling, and they're doing it for 60 laps or 50 laps or 40 laps or whatever it is. My neck would fall off.
I think so too. Spa is definitely one of the sickest tracks in the world, and you're very lucky to have been able to, especially to go for a lap in the safety car. It's funny when you see them on TV. The safety car looks like, it's like, oh my god, is this guy even trying? And I know that he's in there probably giving it absolutely everything.
Everything.
And
That was the
F1 cars are back just like
last race. They were begging for the safety car to get a move on.
It just it really, when you see, because the safety car is a high performance car. It's not like it's some little shit box. It's a proper car.
Yeah.
And the Formula 1 car is it really just kind of gives you that perspective on the level of performance that the F1 cars have. It's mind blowing. Absolutely mind blowing.
Any dislikes in terms of tracks? Anything that you didn't enjoy?
I think by far, and I don't think I can get in trouble for this, but the worst experience of a race for F1 I ever had was, I think it might have been 2010 or 11 Valencia. Some people will remember that Valencia was a Spanish Grand Prix, and it was down at the port where they'd done the sailing race, the America's Cup, and it was all around down there. And I think on that day, if 20 cars started it, or 18, I think there may have only been 18 back then, but the order in which they started was the order in which they finished.
Just absolutely boring.
Procession.
Oh my gosh, that was and the other thing about that weekend, which I will always remember, is that back then Red Bull were the leading team, so they got the pick of the pit, so they were right next to the steward's box, and there was basically a cement board wall between us. And so my entire weekend was spent either hearing a Red Bull revving to full thing in the pit, or when they weren't doing that, they had their music blasting.
Really?
So dislikes Valencia and that noise.
Do you think it was the track that made that race boring? Or is it the cars at the time? Or a combination of?
I think that track turned out to be not a particularly interesting track. I mean, it was a strange design. You may remember the back straight had 3 or 4 S's in it, and basically if you squinted your eyes and looked down it from the top, you could take a straight line through it. There were no real S's to it. I think the only thing that Valencia is remembered for is the Australian guy who clipped the back of the other car, went up in the air and took out the sign over the track. Mark Webber. Look back at, if you want to see a scary incident, Mark Webber went flying and actually took out a sign.
Jesus.
That was hung over the track.
It's actually a very famous incident. You see it on like all the top 10 like crashes and stuff like that.
Maybe I'm confusing that with, because Alonso had a bad one where he went flying too, didn't he?
I think he barrel rolled at the same time too.
Yeah.
Was it Germany though, I think?
Yeah, that wasn't the same track. Not the same track.
How much interaction do you get with drivers, if any, at all? You mentioned, or heads of teams. You mentioned, Christian Horner.
Yeah. The truth is, the only reason that we have to interact with drivers or team principals or team managers is, a hearing in the stewards room. Other than that, when you travel with the F1 show, obviously, you see each other and people, have common interests and so on. Lewis has been to Barbados. He's done our, Festival of Speed that we've done here and so on. So maybe he might recognize that's a guy I know from Barbados, and we'll say hello. I don't really have a reason. I'm not mates with these folks or anything like that.
Yeah.
So the interaction really is a formal interaction. But within a stewards room, it's a confidential forum, and they're good guys, and they're professionals. That's one of the big things that we have to understand. Being down here in the Caribbean, is we're amateur level of motorsport. When these guys are they're at work, we're at play. They're at work.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, obviously the stewarding has definitely, I would imagine, has given you insight into the sport that most people wouldn't have. And now you've taken, I guess a much more professional approach towards Formula One rather than it being some hobby or something that you just watch on a weekend when it comes on TV. But I know that you've been a fan of motorsport and Formula One for a very long time. And I'm curious to know, how has stewarding, or how has becoming a professional Formula One steward affected your relationship as a fan of the sport, or has it in any way?
I think it certainly has, Jeremy. It's a good question. First of all, I no longer after becoming an F1 steward, I no longer would manifest any favoritism or that's my favorite driver, that's my favorite team or whatever. But we're all fans of this sport. Every steward I've ever met is passionate about motorsport, and you can't be passionate about something without having wishes for this person or not. It doesn't affect my enjoyment of it. It probably more affects my the way in which I am able to interact with my friends, because they all want to
Poke
get me
you.
into giving an opinion on something, and I won't. My opinion, I don't think, is more valid than anybody else's when I'm outside the steward's room. But how is it's given me a different appreciation for the sport, and it's opened a lot of doors, I think, and I hope for many other Barbadians to do, whether it be the officials route, or we see Zane, who I know you all had a good talk
Yep.
with, and a lot of what we have done has opened doors and paved ways for people to do that.
It was interesting when you said, this is a job for people, because it reminded me a lot of when Zane was here. How, he's about work. It's hard work for him. Although he loves it, it's about getting the job done no matter what. So you can almost see a change in people from
mentality,
passion for a sport, but then it's what you do.
Yeah.
So that was pretty interesting.
It is. For sure.
Have there been any tough moments in your career as an F1 steward? Any decisions that stick out in your mind that were tough to make?
That you can speak on?
Yeah. I don't want to.
I wouldn't speak. I can't. I think when you started to ask the question, I thought you were going a different road, which is, the buck stops with the stewards.
Yeah.
At every at the end of the day, to use the FIA words, we're the supreme authority at the event. So we carry with us, you can imagine that our Bible is the International Sporting Code, and all of the entrants, all the competitors, all the drivers, they're expecting a fair competition. Yeah. And we have a big responsibility on our hands to deliver that fair competition to them. So at the start of every race, I have some nervousness and so on, in the hope that, I don't screw this up,
Decisions could have huge impacts on teams and drivers and
millions
championships.
of
Yeah,
little points have millions of dollars of things. So you want to do it right, and you want to be prepared. And I have channeled that energy into being prepared. How can you be prepared for it? I think when you ask the question, you're going to say tough. For me, the tough has been where you're at an event and there's an injury to a competitor, to a marshal or something like that, and you always question yourself, what more could you have done? What's that situation? And 99.9% of the time, the truth is, motorsport is dangerous and stuff does happen, and there is nothing more that you can do. But that to me is the tough part, is if you have to deal with an incident like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I appreciate that answer.
Yeah.
I guess my last, we spoke off air a little bit, but where do you see motorsport heading? You're somewhat close to the sport. Battery, electrification is coming in a big way. I know there's big rule changes for 2022. Where do you see it going?
Well, there's no doubt that the this wave of electrification, if we call it that, is happening. I don't think Formula E is the solution. So I think for a while it will remain some form of a hybrid. The internal combustion engine still has a role to play, and certainly what F1 has done in getting the level of horsepower out of 1500cc engines, it just shows what's there, and the technology is being developed. So where do I think it's going? I hope that the pendulum, personally, has swung a bit. It's starting to swing away from these very sterile tracks with acres of asphalt runoff. And what we've seen with these tracks that have been used this year because of COVID, and they haven't been able to leave Europe, and you're using Mugello, there's no question of track limits because there is a gravel trap.
Yeah.
And it's slower to go out there. So I think that the pendulum where it is going, which I know is not really your question, and maybe it's about the engines and the technology. I'm not sure about that. I think it's going to be electric, and there's going to be more and more dominance of electric in this, and renewables and so on. But I think what is happening is that we're going to see tracks which are providing limits with consequences. Because today there is no consequence if you take a track like Abu Dhabi. There's no, you can miss your braking point by 100 meters and still have enough time to stop before the possibility of a wall. Whereas if you miss your braking point in some of these old tracks, you're going to be two wheels in the gravel, if not all four. So that changes the driving style. It changes, what you're going to really do. So I think that's going to happen. I think the pendulum can swing back.
I think that would be amazing, right? The combination of that plus the new regs, which will hopefully allow for closer racing, plus the budget caps for team spending, which will hopefully pull teams closer together as well now. I know that will take a few years to settle in regardless, I know, but I think the combination of those and the changes that they're making to the rules in regards to the cars could make Formula... No, that's not exciting now, but I would love... When they had that restart and basically ended up with reverse grid, and Pierre Gasly ended up on podium in Monza, that was the most exciting race that we've had in recent times. And I just think I would love to see more of that in Formula One, not two Mercedes on the front that disappear from the rest.
I don't think it'll happen, but I agree with you.
Well, you know what I would encourage you to do, Jeremy, and I'll encourage anyone who's listening to this is, if you have the F1 app and that's where you're watching F1, F2 and F3 is on there as well.
Phenomenal.
Watch F2 and F3.
Racing.
That is racing.
Yeah.
You were mentioning Mick Schumacher. I've watched Mick Schumacher now for 5 years. He's been in series that I've been, and I've watched his development. And many of them, Lando's come through that. That is racing.
I think
it's fantastic.
Robert Schwarzman is going to be a Formula One world champion when he gets there at some point.
He's so talented.
You're pretty close to F2. What do you think? Is there some people that, like Callum a lot of people talk about? Is there any drivers that stick out for you from F2 that are going to make big jumps?
Yeah, again, that's probably an area that I don't go into, but I think that the championship does lend itself to the best coming to the top because the equipment is out of the question, right? All the equipment is the same. And when you look at F2, it's the same 6 or 8 guys who are qualifying in the top 5 or 6 positions, and it's still the same 6 or 8 guys who are winning the races. So that it is a good feeder series. It is, in fact, doing what it's meant to do and weeding out the best.
Racing is phenomenal. I think it's great.
It is way better than Formula One.
Yeah. We're going to pause for 1 minute, and then we're going to end with 5 minutes. All right. I think we're going to end off just talking about Rally Barbados coming up at the end of this month. What are your goals for Rally? Obviously, it's a new machinery for you. What are your goals for King of the Hill and Rally Barbados?
Honestly, number one and only goal is to have a lot of fun. Okay. The truth is that at 56 years old, the eyes are a little bit different than the young boys. And, my willingness to go at 105% is not quite there. But the R5 encourages you to push the limits. And we have a really, really fun group. Roger and David and Saul and Steward and myself. Once the guys get going and they start pushing each other, we're all going to push. But the truth is that group is so competitive. We have demonstrated, Stewart and I and Roger and all of us, there is nothing between these cars. Nothing. It comes down to driver, choice of tires, bit of setup. And when we start pushing each other on the days, it could, the top 2 or 3 guys, if they're separated by 1 second, it will surprise me. I think, obviously, obvious question to do with Rally Barbados then is, Ken Block in an R5. But we have home field advantage. But he also has significant skill. And he certainly has demonstrated that he is willing to drive at 110% all the time.
It is indeed not a bit of not mine syndrome.
Yeah.
And if he rolls the car, it's not really a big problem.
Well, we'll hope to have you back on after Rally Barbados to hear how it all went. If you want to end us off.
Yeah, no, I mean, just of course, we wish you all the best in Rally Barbados. We'll be watching. I'm sure you'll have a blast. Try to bring it home in one piece. But more importantly, just thank you so much for your time. I know you're a busy guy. And we're just really appreciative of you coming and giving us some time chatting about F1. It's not often you get to sit in a room with the F1 steward.
Sure.
So it was nice to pick your brain. And yeah, just want to thank you very much for your time.
Jeremy, thanks. And James, I thank you for the opportunity. I think it's important also really to say maybe, you know, motorsport has been the number one sport in Barbados on different ways of measuring it. And it's not, the sport is not the number one sport because of I'm where I am. I'm where I am because that sport has been so well subscribed by the spectators, by the competitors, by the sponsors, whatever it is. So I'm just lucky to be in the right place at the right time that I could get to be there. Mm-hmm. And I'm very, very proud when I go to be able to say I'm representing Barbados and you know, it works well. So I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah,
happy to talk anytime. Pleasure. And I'll sure to report that I had a lot of fun in Rally Barbados.
Good. Well, we'll see you out there.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.